Every time I blow the whistle, I want you to write down the first thought that comes to your mind. I'm going to blow the whistle every 30 seconds. You get a pen and paper, write down the first thought that comes to your mind. Write it down. Write it down. Write it down, pretty quick, 30 seconds. On average, we have around 60,000 thoughts per day, so they say. But for the most part, they're productive, harmless. For example, you have breakfast, you drive, you brush your teeth, not in any order as such. You do many things throughout the day where automatically you're on autopilot. Also, we have unproductive thoughts. We have times when we don't really pay too much attention to our thought process. We don't really pay too much attention to our thought process, and the trouble with that is these thoughts are habitual. Have you ever done something where you regret what you've done? For example, you've done a behavioural pattern and you regretted it. You thought, I can't believe I've done that again. Done that before? Or have you ever misinterpreted a situation? Have you ever done that? I'm sure we all have to a certain degree in certain situations. So, for the most part, the 60,000 thoughts we have per day, they serve us to a point. But we also have these thoughts which, in the CBT world, in the world of CBT, the concept of CBT, refers to biased way of thinking about ourselves, the world, and others. And if we think about certain things in certain situations in an irrational way, it's going to impact our life. And this happens automatically. Aaron Beck, one of the pioneers of cognitive therapy, psychiatrist, he first came up with the concept of, or proposed a theory behind cognitive distortion. Beyond that, David Burns, one of his students, popularized it. Notably in the handbook, you got a chance to read it, the Feeling Good Handbook. If you haven't read that before, it's worth a read. But what he did is he gave these distortions labels and various meanings, so it's worth a read. In the last seminar that we covered, I covered each label. I haven't got time to do that this evening, but I do suggest if you haven't seen it already, watch the last seminar that we covered. If you've already watched it, do watch the last seminar. It's worth watching. We covered 10 common distortions: all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, mental filter, discounting the positive. We covered jumping to conclusions, magnification, emotional reasoning. We covered should statements. We covered labeling, personalization, and blame. I won't have time to go into those in detail this evening, but I do recommend, if you haven't watched the first seminar, do watch the first seminar. It's well worth watching. Email me if you haven't watched it before, and I'll send you the link to YouTube. Alternatively, if you haven't watched it, do carry on watching tonight's seminar. I'm sure you get value out of it. To share a story with you, a while ago, I had this opportunity. This is going back a good few years now. I worked in professional football as a performance coach. I left my job in professional football mutually, and I decided to do what I'm doing now, so to speak. And the opportunity came up to do what I'm doing now through hard work and determination to make a difference in the world. Yet I had this opportunity to do a show on radio, BBC 5 Live. Even not from the UK, BBC 5 Live is one of the biggest radio stations in the UK, and added to that, it was going to be a very provocative broadcaster. He didn't buy into mental skills. Now, I'd spent a lifetime working in a high-pressure environment. I spent a long time studying every skill I could find from a mental point of view and mental performance, and I'd accumulated a big toolbox. And one of the reasons for me doing what I did is I wanted to make a big impact and make a difference. As a child, growing up, I went through many challenges, many challenges. Very challenging environment to the point that my mum was ill, dad got into it at work, we had very little or no money, we were bordering homelessness, as poor as you could be in modern day Australia at the time, and it was quite challenging. Not only that, I had very severe asthma, and I'd taken a lot of medication a lot, it was tough going. I found my salvation in sport, and I felt that I reached the point in my own life that I wanted to give something back, which is why I decided to move away from full-time football. I still work in the environment now on my own terms, yet my vision was to help young people who were going through what I went through and share some of my thoughts and feelings and pearls of wisdom, so to speak, to help them. And from helping them, I obviously went on to do a lot of other things as well, yet that was a driving force for me. And for me, this opportunity on radio was an opportunity to reach a lot of people. Yet all that said and done, as much as I worked in high pressure situations, as much as I had all the skills, when I got the opportunity to do this talk on radio on mental skills, I, over the space of 2 or 3 days prior to going on air, felt so overwhelmed and anxious. And the reason why I felt that way and was feeling that way as I'm preparing was because in my mind, I was thinking, well, if I pitch it too academic, I could lose and get very technical and jargonistic, and I could lose the people that I really want to get it out to. But if I pitch it to a level where I demystify all the jargon, then what will the academics say? So I was kind of caught in the middle type thing, and feeling really overwhelmed and so much pressure and anxious. And as I'm going in and preparing for this interview, provocative broadcast, I'm thinking of all these scenarios of people saying one thing or the other, and my mind was just in a spin, so to speak. I was all over the place, as you do in those situations. Yet, what happened to me in that situation, as I get in the taxi to drive to the radio station, I rip up my script and I said to myself, Jim, what is the meaning of the situation? What is the meaning of you going on air? Why are you doing it? What is the meaning of you going on air? I asked myself this question over and over again. What is the meaning? What's this projecting? And the answer came within. I recorded my thoughts, the thoughts I was having at the time. I actually recorded them. What if I overpitch it? What if I underpitch it? What if this happens? What if I fail? What if I get taken in the wrong way? And I thought, well, what is the meaning? And I recorded my thoughts, and I then started to restructure my thought process and change my whole perception of the opportunity. And I said to myself, if I can reach one person who has gone through what I went through, particularly when I was growing up, and I can help them in any way, shape or form, then it's job done. I've set out what I've gone out to achieve. And when I went on the show, I was so in the zone. I was so focused on an outcome of reaching people and helping people, I literally became oblivious to the broadcast. I became oblivious to anything else other than really focused. And at the end of it, ironically, the actual broadcaster, and you know who you are if you're watching tonight, asked me to help him off air with his emotional eating. And I got all these flood of text coming in everywhere saying you were great. I literally was in so much the zone that I didn't even remember the show. And it was the driving force behind me going on and doing more stuff on air and also keeping my career onto a new level. But not only that, when I was reflecting in the car too, what was going through my mind, stuff like what an English teacher had said when I was back at school. And I said I want to be a writer, I want to write books. He goes, Jim, you'll never write books. That's not you. You'll not amount to anything, so to speak. And this was true reality. And this was going through my mind. And I thought, you know what? Ironically, I have gone on to write books. If you've read any of my books, some of them have gone to #1. A bit of a plug for them anyway, but it goes to show. It's desire. But your thought process is key. Your mindset is key. What goes through your mind will set you up emotionally. And your emotions will have a big impact on your behaviour, so to speak. So it's really important to understand and evaluate your thought process. I mentioned earlier, for the most part, it's harmless, but there are times that we have situations where our thought process is not serving us. It doesn't work for us. So in the last seminar, we mentioned, we covered the labels around these distortions. You haven't watched them, do watch them again. Tonight's seminar, we're going to cover ways to identify these distortions and start to challenge them. Challenge your distortions. Start to challenge them. We're going to always identify them because awareness is key. So if you've already watched the first seminar, Understanding Distortions, do watch it. Do email me. You get a lot of it. Now tonight's seminar is not intended to treat anyone. It's for purely educational purposes. Purely educational purposes. Each case is based on formulation. So tonight's seminar is purely for educational purpose. Yet it might be useful if you're a student of CBT or any other therapy for that matter. You're a therapist, you're a teacher, you're a coach, you're a parent, or you just want to learn, or maybe you're an expert, you're an expert in your field, you want a different perspective, you want to maybe pick up a few ideas of what I do and how I use some of these processes. Entirely up to you, but it's purely for educational purposes, not intended to treat anybody. A treatment plan is based on case formulation. You need to get I would recommend, if you're going to go down the road of treatment, is get a referral of a medical profession, or at least consult someone professionally on a one-to-one basis and discuss the suitability of some of the processes that you would use. So do get a pen if you haven't got one already, and join me. Partake in the exercises. And as we're going to cover today is identify. I'm going to give you some step-by-step ideas and tools of what I use to help my clients identify. So why do we identify these cognitive distortions? Why? Why is the point of identifying? Because by identifying, and like I mentioned in my story, driving in the car, you can help make the distinction between what's irrational and rational. And I ask you the question, what's rational thinking? What's irrational thinking? There's a fine line between the two, isn't there? Okay? But by being aware of what's not rational in your reality, you can start cultivating and strengthening a more healthy thought process. So by identifying your cognitive distortions, what you can do is you see the link between thoughts and feelings, so the link between the two. Because our thoughts and beliefs can lead to problematic emotions and actions. Have you ever retaliated in a way that you regret what you did? I'm sure we all have, and you have at different points. Irrational thoughts and beliefs can lead to problematic emotional states and emotions and behaviour like anxiety and depression and self-esteem issues. And once you're aware of them, you can start to become a healthier mental process. You can start to evaluate things and achieve a better quality of life. Now, the purpose is not to eradicate emotions. Emotions are a big part of life, and I truly believe in the academic system we need to teach young people about emotions. We need to teach young people about emotions. Emotions are a guidance system. They're to be embraced. We need to embrace emotions in more ways than one. Emotions are telling you something's wrong. In the Western world, we tend to look for distractions. Look for distractions for emotions. We look for distractions. We look for external stimuli. Whether it's living the illusion, chasing the illusion. You know the illusion chasers in this world. The ones who think, someday I will. When I have that car, when I have that house, when I have that product. They become a victim of marketing. Now, I'm not against nice things. All I'm saying is, like anything in life, I bet you've bought a new car in the past, and after a few months it just becomes part of the furniture, so to speak. It's not the be-all end-all. I would suggest to say that a gratitude list would have equally, if not more power. Writing down what you're grateful for, and the emotions stimulated from a gratitude list. Now, write down what you're grateful for. The powerful emotions that you invoke by doing that is equally, if not more powerful than the instant gratification. Now, like I said, I'm not against nice things. It's a byproduct of sense of self. We have bad coping strategies, negative coping strategies, or at least in my opinion, coping strategies. Some people, they self-harm, they drink, they substance misuse. They look for salvation, they live this life of illusion. And by cultivating a more healthy thought process, we can be more self-acceptance. We can accept ourselves for who we are, who you are, the value you add, you just being you, not tying into your profession, not tying into anything, what you've got, what you haven't got. You being you are worth. All, you're special. We're all special. We're all one in the universe. We're all equally as important as anybody else. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do. In the end, you can't do what you do forever. So, for me, The goal is not to eradicate emotions. Emotions are to be embraced. And sometimes the first thing people do when they experience pain, they go to the medical people. I'm not against medical and I work with people, medical people come to my courses and they learn the tools I teach them. They do a great job and so on and so forth. All I'm saying, in my opinion, just medicating can't be the answer. Now, I'm obviously, each case is based on its own merit and formulation and situation, but I truly believe there are ways and things that we can do to be more proactive that can really help us, like meditation, exercise, connecting to friends, doing all these things can make a big impact to our own well-being, and we don't do enough of it, I believe. And the trouble is that these irrational thoughts, they are like a spiral. They don't go away. Old habits die hard. They stay for a lifetime for some people, and they spiral if you don't deal with them. And they can really affect you in more ways than one. They can really affect the quality of your life in many ways. So tonight, look at ways you can identify them. We talked about first seminar, understanding them. Tonight is about identifying these cognitive distortion. Now, cognitive is just jargon for thoughts, and distortion is a distorted thinking pattern, as you, I'm sure, are well aware. So, cognitive thought, so it's an irrational thought. You could class as negative thought, but how do you classify the two? And we'll look at ways to do that, identify it this evening. Now, what I do with my clients, and you might want to take a pen here, by the way, if you haven't already got one. The first step I do is I get my clients to be aware of what's going through their mind at the time of the feeling, of the thought process. So I get them to write it down as soon as it's occurring. So, for example, they feel jealous, sad, angry, depressed. If it sort of sets and manifests itself, what thoughts are attached to those feelings, and even physical sensations. They have butterflies in the stomach and they get tense, and notice their thoughts associated with the feelings and write it down when it's occurring if possible. It's not always practical to do that, but I ask them to scale from 1 to 100, 100 being high, the impact of the feeling and the thought, to write it down. So 70%, and maybe on another occasion it could be less or more, but to do scale it, that's one way of quantifying. One way of quantifying thought process is by measuring it, whichever way we can. And for me, scaling it makes sense, because it's not like running a race. You run 100 meters in 20, 10 seconds, whatever. You've got a way of quantifying. How do you quantify that? Now, I know by scaling it, it's only an assumption and an educated guess. Yeah, it's better than doing nothing at all. It's not always practical to write it down when it's occurring. You might be in a meeting, you might be driving. It's not practical if you're driving to start writing your feelings and thought process. So if that happens, what I do is role play, imagery and in vivo, which I'll sort of touch on in more detail as the seminar unfolds. You might do role play. The second step is to write down your actions. What did you do? Did you become withdrawn, aggressive? Did you seek reassurance and validation? Did you avoid it? Did you do safety behaviors? What did you do as a result of those feelings and thoughts? What did you do as a result of that situation, of those feelings and thoughts? Okay. The third step is to write down what triggered your feelings. What activated them? What was the trigger? What was the activation? Could have been the past, the present, the future. It could have been memory, people, objects, physical sensations, Facebook. It could have been almost anything that activated it, but you've got to be aware of it. What activated it? What was the activation? Example, I was talking to a woman once on a course I was running, and she said to me that she felt a sense of anxiety. She felt anxiety. And as we sort of like looked at her thoughts around anxiety and what she was doing behaviourally, when we got to the activation, what activated it? It was the thought of going to her daughter's wedding. Now, you might be asking, her daughter's wedding, what's the big difference, Jim? What's the big deal with daughter's wedding? She should be excited. Well, the issue was that at her daughter's wedding, her ex-husband of 20-something years was going to be there, and he had a new relationship. And she said that in her mind, he looked really happy in his new relationship, and she felt upset and devastated, and like no doubt people would in that situation. Yet in saying that, she wanted to go to the wedding. So that's what you write down, the activation. It could be a number of things. Now once you've done that, what's quite useful is to write down your beliefs about the activating event. Because different people can react differently in different events, can't they? So the fourth step is really write down your beliefs and perceptions about the event. Now, you could take 3 people in one scenario and they could all react different to one event. So let's say, for example, 3 people are being made redundant at where you work. The activation, the event is being made redundant. Now, one person might be devastated. They might believe in their own mind, I'll never get another job, and woe is me, and they might personalize it. They might focus on the negative, they might get overwhelmed. As a result, they believe that they're not capable or too old to find another job. Their thoughts are, what's going to happen? I'm redundant, I can't pay the bills, I live on the street. They feel emotionally overwhelmed. They start becoming withdrawn. They might get aggressive. They might look for reassurance. Physically, they could tense up, become lethargic. That's scenario 1. The other scenario could be the other extreme. One person might think redundancy, great, money, holiday, woo, start a business, fantastic, brilliant, fantastic. Young enough to start a business, I end up that job anyway, I believe in myself, my thoughts are, it was time to move on anyway, I feel fantastic, behaviourally you might be able to have a holiday, come back and structure a plan for a new business, and they might feel fantastic physiologically as well, and it shows. And another person might be more neutral. It might be, well, I believe I can get another job. I've lost my job in the past. I've got another job. It's like in life, you could have a job, you lose it, you end up in a better job in the future, a relationship, so on and so forth. And their thoughts might be, well, quite neutral, quite grounded. I might have a break. I feel neither too down or neither too, I feel okay. I feel like I'm in the right place to move on. And they might get a new CV. They might be proactive, go to networking groups, speak to people, pick up the phone, get some ideas, and be proactive. So I'm not saying one response is better than the other. I'm just saying that, and I'm not saying that different permutations don't affect the response. Obviously, if you're down to your last paycheck and you've got a lot of bills to pay, it can have an external impact on your thought process. Of course it can. If you've got £1 million in the bank, it makes a whole difference. One would think to a certain extent. Yet in saying that, what we can control, and the only thing that we can control is our thoughts. We can't control the cards we're dealt with, we can control how we respond to situations. Life can be pretty cruel sometimes, by the way, as well. I don't deny that. I'm not airy-fairy, wishy-washy, life's bed of roses, everything's fantastic. What I do believe is in making the most of the situation you're in. And that sort of demonstrates how this process works and what we can do. The 5th step is disputes. Like I did when I was in the car, my thought process. I found a way to dispute what was going on through in my mind and come up with a more better way of thinking. So I said to this woman, for example, what can you dispute? And I used the following questions to help her dispute what's going on. I said to her, are these realistic thoughts that you're having? These are questions that are not exhaustive, just to give you a bit of an idea. Where is the evidence? Because she was talking about what it meant to her and how she felt alone, isolated, and she might have meet them and she felt they were perfect together, and so on and so forth. Are you judging things on feeling or fact? So sometimes we judge things on feeling and we don't question our thoughts, and they spiral. They spiral, and I'm not attempting to give anyone any advice on what or know what not to do, yet in saying, I think the outcome she wanted, at least she told me, was to go to the wedding and at least neutralise her thought process. It was important to her. And in many situations, we experience different things. In another situation, I was delivering some CBT training, or aspects of CBT training, amongst other things, to staff that worked in the care sector. And this young girl had been assigned to work with me as a co-trainer. On her first session we delivered, and at the end we had feedback. 95% of feedback was awesome. 5% was quite negative. And in her mind, a week later when we re-delivered, she was still stewing over the 5%. Still stewing over it. And she knew a lot of this stuff anyway. It's quite ironic, isn't it? Because we sometimes give good advice and don't take it ourselves. And I use some of those questions. Is it valid? Is it true? Where's it coming from? Is it feeling? What about the 95%? So her mental filter wasn't focusing on the 95% that was great, it was on the 5% that wasn't great. How did you get to feel? If in life you try and please everyone, you please no one. And for the most part, you've got to decide, is it constructive feedback anyway? Sometimes people have their own issues, they project on you. There's that as well. But that's not to go on in that situation, just to demonstrate to you that in certain situations we need to dispute. There are other ways of disputing and challenging these cognitive distortions we're going to touch on tonight, shortly. Well, there are other ways. We won't go into too much detail because of time, but there are other ways and means to do that, which we'll touch on, to really help. Like an arm wrestle, get the leverage back. We need to get the leverage back. We need to get the leverage back. We need to make sure that we take control. We take control of our thought process. We don't let anyone else take control of our thoughts. The one thing that we can control, you don't give the ascendancy. You take control back. You stay focused. On the sixth step, for each of the original thoughts and beliefs, we want to generate a more balanced response. For example, the woman I mentioned who was on the course, who was anxious about the wedding and seeing her ex-husband, a more balanced response. A more balanced response. The woman, I talked about the young girl in the presentation, a more balanced response. What do I mean a more balanced response? A different way of seeing it, like me in the car on the way to 5 Live. A more balanced way of seeing it. Let's look at a different way of looking at it. A more different response to the original thoughts and feelings. You could reframe. You could look at a different meaning. You change your perspective, change your world. I'm not saying to go from one extreme to the other, being completely anxious and overwhelmed to, yeah, great. Yeah, in saying that, sometimes at least neutralize it. Neutralize it. Because in the end, it's you that suffers as a result. It was her that was suffering as a result. Her ex-husband wasn't, in her mind, or at least what somebody told me, bothered about the situation. He was going to be there enjoying himself. And why shouldn't she? Why shouldn't she? Why should she surrender her power to circumstances she wasn't in control of? She's not in control of what he does. What can you do? That's life. These things happen. I don't condone or condemn. That's life. We must move on. Life is short. There will never be, there's neither you in 7 billion people in the world. There never has been. There never will be. This is it. Our time on this earth is like a drop in the ocean. Like a speck out there, a very, very small time, at least in this genetic form anyway. You owe it to yourself. So how could she see it differently? We looked at ways to reframe it, see it differently, challenge the actual thought, more balanced way of looking at it. She was moving on her life, she had a lot going for her, she was a great person, phenomenal person, and no doubt eventually she'll end up meeting someone when she's in the right headspace. She'll do well, back herself, believe in herself. The woman, the young girl presentation, it was the first presentation. First presentation, you get 95% good feedback, and you're going to focus on the 5%. And when you looked at the feedback, it wasn't even constructive. So it's a more balanced way of looking at it. Look, your first time. If my first time I presented got 95%, or anybody else, but it's all subjective, isn't it? They've got to work it out. You've got to facilitate for themselves. The 7th step is then rewrite the original emotion you wrote down. So we talked about writing the emotion. If you do it when it's occurring, if you do it in vivo, imagery, role play, write it down again with the new balanced approach of looking at it. So it might have been 70%. The prospect of seeing, and I did some role play for this woman. I was her ex-husband, so to speak. And it wasn't a role I was too happy about doing, yet I did do it in role play. And I thought, well, hopefully she doesn't, punch me in the face, anything like that. We role played. In the beginning it was really, really high. And towards the end, it was more neutral. It'd gone down from about 70 to about 20, 30%. And obviously you're not going to recreate the situation completely because it's on the day. It's different, isn't it? Yet in saying that, it really helped them to go forward. The young girl in the presentation situation, her emotions, her anger and frustration, and I can't do it and I can't believe it, they went down significantly as well because you reevaluate it. You've done that before. I'm sure you've done it before where in your own life you've looked at things a certain way and you've talked to somebody and reevaluated it and your perspective changes. You change the perspective, you change your world. The step 8, what I do is write a plan. it's really important that you write a plan of action for more constructive behaviour in the future. Because for me, you've got to keep going forward. Write a plan of action. What can you do to manage the situation? There's going to be times in this woman's life where she's going to come across what will she do in future situations? What can she do? What strategies can we give her? I gave her some strategies like NLP anchoring, thought stopping, breathing exercises, reframe, various strategies. The young girl who was presenting with me, I gave her some strategies to use going forward. To use, like anchoring to affect her emotional state. I got her to focus on what she did really, really well, do some imagery, all various exercises that you can use on various levels. And sometimes you can't isolate the event, you can't isolate the trigger, the activating event. In that woman's case, she's going to see her ex-husband again potentially because they had children together at events. It's going to happen. What does she do? Avoidance and not turn up? Who's going to suffer then? Who is going to suffer then? Why should she suffer? Because of what he did. It's wrong, in my mind. And the young girl is going to present. She's going to go and be a phenomenal presenter. And she has done well as a presenter. Why should she surrender her power to a couple of people who have never presented in their life? So a plan of action to go forward is key. And that gives you an idea of the 8 steps. What I would suggest to do is go over the recording again and go through all the 8 steps. And learn them as you can, as you go along, from an educational point of view. Added to that, what you can also do is to challenge these distortions, beliefs. Other things you can do is examine the evidence. You can, like we mentioned earlier, fire questions. Examine the evidence. Question your thoughts. Question your thoughts. And I tell you, if you've got your own children, you're a teacher, I tell my children, if anyone ever says anything negative to you, you question it. You don't take it on board. You put it in the bin. Don't let anybody ever say anything to you that doesn't fit in with you. And I urge you, if you've got your own children, what you do is entirely up to you, is to make sure, because the world is a different place than it used to be these days, with social media, modern technology, all these things that make our life easier are making it harder because we're forgetting some core values like compassion and empathy and all that sort of stuff, really. Because when you send an email, you don't see the person face to face. And text message, and we're losing that empathy that we used to have in the past. At least I think, in my opinion, when people say stuff, they write stuff to fuel their own insignificance. And I say to you, you question that. Who is anyone to call anybody else? And our worst enemy is ourselves. No one will ever call us anything more than we call ourselves. And you question, where's the evidence for this? I said to the woman, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence for this? Okay? Where's the evidence that she was presenting for her not attending the wedding? Without going into too much detail, she felt it was her obligation not to go. She would ruin things. She would mess things up. She didn't want to be overwhelmed. And so on and so forth. Where's the evidence that that's going to happen? Does your daughter want you to be there? Of course she does. Do other people want you to be there? Yes. You played the biggest role in your daughter's life, bringing her up. You played the biggest role in her life, bringing her up as a mum. That's the most important role anyone can have. A mum is a nutritionist, psychiatrist, taxi driver, anything. Stand up and look yourself in the mirror. Examine the evidence is one way to challenge distortion. The other ways you can do distortion to challenge it is the survey method. Now, the survey method is you could ask people, you could ask other people. For example, the young girl who she was focusing so much on this negative feedback, I said go to a speaking group, Toastmasters, and ask them what it's like when you first start presenting. Some of the best speakers in the world have got to start somewhere. You learn to walk and talk, and they are miracles in life. They are miracles in life to learn to walk and talk. They're miracles in their own right. You can do that, you can do anything. Anything. And don't let anyone put you down, and go to a speaking group and ask them what it's like when you first start speaking. And they'll tell you, of course you're going to get anxious and you're going to feel nerves. Well, nerves are good. If you can control the nerves, it means you care. Channel them in the right way. So the survey method, asking people, and most of the time ask people who are where you want to be. There's no point asking people who are going to be damning and put you down. The other thing you do is the double standard method. No one will put you down more than you put yourself down. Nobody will put you down the way you put yourself down. If you spoke to anybody else the same way you spoke to yourself, you'd have no friends, or anybody for that matter. And I say to you, how would you advise someone else who's experiencing that thinking that you are? For example, I said to the woman who was going through the issue with the anxiety about going to the wedding, I said, how would you advise your best friend? Or someone also that you're not emotionally connected to, if they're in the same situation? She said, what I would do, well, I would advise them to go and enjoy it. And people appreciate you being there. There's many other people there as well as your ex-husband there. And what he did, he did. You can't change the past. And also, who knows what the future holds? Who knows anyway? Life's a marathon. It's not really like competing anyway. That's life. Yet, and she said that she would advise someone to go and enjoy themselves, and if they felt a bit anxious or well, just take a step out discreetly and have a breather, whatever. And you have to put a brave face on avoidance or anything else for that matter. And I say to you, that's a really good technique to use. A young girl with presentation issues, I said, how will you advise somebody else? He said, I'd tell them, look, you did an amazing presentation for your first time, an amazing presentation, 95% was great. Enjoy it. You contribute really, really well, believe in yourself. So that's quite a useful thing to do. The double standard method. The other thing that you can do as well, which is quite useful too, is the cost-benefit analysis. Now I've got a whole DVD on this. We won't go into too much detail because of time. Examine your attitude and belief, the advantage of keeping it, okay, and disadvantage of it, of the attitude of belief or emotion or feeling, whatever you want to call it. Leveraging, is it worth keeping? To the woman on the course who was anxious about seeing her husband at the wedding, is it worth keeping that attitude, that belief, those feelings? What's the advantage of keeping them? The advantage is that of keeping them, there wasn't really a great deal of advantage to keep, and there was disadvantage. She would miss out on her daughter, all things being well, getting married once. So many things, and it's a leveraging it. The young girl of the presentation, the advantages of keeping the belief that she had that was focused around she's never going to make a good presenter or speaker. The disadvantages, you weigh it all up, and you could argue at this point that you look at that and you think, well, actually, as it happens, it could be a negative thing, because you might look at it and think, well, maybe the behaviour is working for me, but sometimes you're not ready for change. And if you're not ready for change, life's not competition. Yet in saying that, deliberation can keep us stuck for a long time. This can give us some sort of leverage to start weighing things up. It's a useful thing as well to use. The other thing you can do is the semantic method. Okay, and what we mean by that is our language, the way we project things, the way we say things. We have, sometimes we have emotionally charged language, so to speak, or we set ourselves up, put pressure on ourselves. I should be this way, we can speak in a certain way, I should have done better. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, with hindsight, we all know better. We all know better. So what we can do in certain situations is reframe our self-talk rather than beating ourselves up. I should know better. And I'm, and sort of engaging in this dialogue. We can, be a little bit easy on ourselves. A little bit easy on ourselves and neutralize the language a little bit more to help us in that situation. The other thing we can do as well is what we call reattribution. And what I mean by reattribution is, instead of assuming that it's all your fault, instead of it's all you, you're the fault to the problem, you're the fault to all the world's problems, so to speak. Think about the factors that have contributed to the problem. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for responsibility. We take responsibility in life. Yet what I would say, it makes sense to realise that there's never a real one factor, isn't there? It's a contribution of factors that we end up in a certain situation. So this woman was blaming herself a lot, personalising it, blaming herself, and labelling herself and all the like. If I didn't do this, if I spent more time, if I did this, Listen, it takes two to tango. There's many factors that contribute towards certain things. So another way is to do what we call the reattribution. It's quite a useful process to use as well in certain situations. These are some ways, and some of these ways you'll find in the book I mentioned, which is quite useful, the David Burns Feeling Good Handbook. It's quite a good read. He talks about these, a lot of the work I'm talking about tonight. I give him credit for, yet in saying that I put my own spin on it too, and you can do other stuff like reframing and many other interventions you can use that I use certainly to help with these distortions. I do belief change, NLP belief change, and sometimes in certain situations you're going to find it hard to get to the bottom of the feeling or thought or where it's come from. And the question you can ask yourself in that situation is the question I asked myself when I mentioned I was driving in that taxi, is ask yourself, what's the meaning of the situation? What's the meaning? I said to this woman who talked about her wedding, or the wedding that she was going to go, her daughter's wedding. I said, what's the meaning about the situation? What does this tell you about you? Of the whole situation? Really getting your head around what exactly does it mean? The meaning of the young girl, the presentations. What's it mean? What's the meaning? What's it mean about you? What's the story? What's your narrative? We go through life with a narrative for the most part of our life, the stories we tell ourselves. What story are you telling yourself? And one way to get to the bottom of that, I find, is a couple of techniques I use, is the downward arrow technique in CBT and the NLP meta model. Because when you think about it, words are labeled. If I say the word relationship, and you ask 10 people about the word relationship, they'll all give it a meaning for it. Because linguistically, we can only express ourselves so much. So much. Underneath all that, there's thoughts, feelings, emotions, and we all have a unique map of the world. Example, if you walked in the room and you saw 10 people, in the room, you'd appreciate they all look different physically. Yet we can make the assumption they all think the same, because we can't see their mental thought process, alternatively think the same as us. We've all got our own unique reality, our own values and beliefs and schemas and associations, and we've all got our own reality. And one way to sort of get to the bottom of that is using the downward arrow. We won't get time to go through it tonight, but I will go through it in future seminar, and the meta model. It's quite powerful. You can dig deep. Example, if you were going to work tomorrow and you went to the shop, you tell the boss I'm going to the shop. In your mind, you know which shop you're going to, what you're buying, and so on and so forth, but you wouldn't tell the boss every person you're going to walk past and the exact shop you're going to and the ingredients of what you're buying, and you delete information because of the manageable level. If you had to express everything that's going through your mind linguistically, you'd be there forever. So what you do is you delete a lot of information and you generalize. You generalize you brush your teeth, you generalize you can cook, you generalize you can drive. Because if you didn't generalize, you have to reload stuff all the time. So you do that as well. And we do have distortions to a certain extent as well. So you stop at a stop sign. It's a good thing to do because obviously you distort in your mind what could happen if you went straight through. So on a certain level, distorted information isn't a bad thing. It's only when it's the outcome, I would suggest, is affected in a way. If you're not living the life, the quality of your life is going to be affected by the quality of what goes through your mind and your emotional existence in life. So some people would say, some professionals would say that the difference between mental illness and wellness is the frequency, magnitude and duration of cognitive distortions. So they say, yeah, it's your call. What's rational, irrational. It's your call in your mind. You've got to sort of decide how you want to live. I suggest anyone in any situation with my clients, how they want to live their life, which is key. That's the important thing. The key is the like we mentioned earlier, we give the meaning. What on an esoteric level, what does life mean anyway, other than the meaning that we give it? Esoteric level, we don't really know. In the end, we give it meaning. Yet life, like I mentioned earlier, it's short. It's game time. You go out there, and it's about living it. The other things you can do as well, if it's not practical to identify the distortion, because you're not going to be thinking about it all the time. For example, if you've got a fear of flying, and you're afraid that if you fly, the plane's going to happen, and the plane's going to fire, and noise, and all the like, you're not, every time a plane goes over your head, you're not ducking for cover, because it's not in your mind. So the key is to be able to, I'm not suggesting recreate a scenario where flying is concerned, but using imagery or role play. So in the case of the woman I mentioned earlier, it's about doing role play. Me taking the part of a husband, how I should react, and imagery visualization. In the case of the young girl presenting, it's about doing role play and getting her to present and measure her thoughts and feelings that way. Because sometimes it's not possible for your client, or certainly the clients I work with, it's not on their radar because they're automatic. In the world of hypnotherapy, we call it subconscious. It's the part of the mind that controls our physiology. You don't tell your heart to beat, you tell it to breathe, it happens automatically. Emotions and behaviour, you could argue to a certain extent, could happen unconsciously to a point. They're in there somewhere, they're in that part of the brain, the emotional core of the brain, the limbic system in one way or the other. We have natural reactions, fight, flight, freeze, the amygdala, fight, right, flight, freeze. For example, if you saw a spider on the floor in the library, you could jump in the air instantly. We, from an evolutionary point of view, haven't evolved in that aspect. We react automatically, and then when you sort of see it's a spider, it's harmless, you come back to your senses. Or if you have road rage, you don't think for 1 minute in road rage. A person could be racing, their wife could be pregnant, to the hospital. You don't think that way. Immediately we can sort of personalise it. If a gush of wind blows your car, you don't argue at the wind, because you don't personalise it in that way, shape or form. But ultimately, in the end, these things are automatic, but they're also subjected to certain experiences as well, and situations. And sometimes, if they're not on your radar and your client, they might be confused. What do you mean by the distortion? What do you mean by this automatic thought? What do you mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is the force you're having based on that event, based on the activation, based on what's activating it, the force that you have based in that situation, or maybe based on the outcome you want. That's the key. Either based on the outcome or the situation that's contributing towards your emotional reaction, your behavioural reaction. That's the important thing to take note here. And by doing that, if it's not practical to find as and when it happens, you can do imagery, in vivo, role play, to recreate the situation as close as you possibly can. Be patient. Be patient. The other thing you can do as well, which is quite useful, because a lot of information to take on board in a short space of time, which is good for you to take away, and a way to practice. One technique I'm going to give you to go away and practice, which will help you learn the process and help to understand and be aware of distortion. A 3-step process you can use to practice, because like all new information, it takes time to digest. We're all running our own race. Some of you have been doing it for a while, some might have started, but you're running your own race, and I believe that it's about you taking what you want out of it and running your own race. One thing you can do is practice writing down, connecting to your emotion, maybe writing down feelings. So you might be in a situation where you feel a little bit nervous. You have to choose anything too overly try, just a mild, uncomfortable feeling, and notice the force associated with the feelings as the next step. So if you have a feeling, for example, you might be moderately sad, a little bit anxious, you might be slightly envious, and then just write down the force associated to that. And then once you've written the force associated to that, practice what label they are from a distortion point of view, from a visualization or nothing thinking, mental filter. For example, someone might, for example, feel a bit anxious in a certain situation. They might feel a bit nervous, and then you sort of get them to write down their thoughts around the anxiety and nerves. They might say, well, I'm going to fail the exam. I'm afraid I'm going to fail the exam. Now, then what you can do at the end of that is find, okay, what does that constitute in terms of the label as a distortion? It could be fortune telling or jump to conclusion. And you practice that, and by practicing that over and over again, you start building a confidence base to be aware. And the more aware you are, the easier it becomes. You've got to start somewhere. And I believe in this world that we live in, sometimes as adults, we're afraid of confusion. And whenever you learn anything, you can be a little bit confused. But after confusion comes clarity. A 2-year-old, you've got a 2-year-old, what do they do a lot? If you had a 2-year-old who's grown up now, you have one now, they ask why, what? They're not afraid of confusion. we go through this academic system in school where we pressurize ourselves to know all the answers to all the world's problems, so to speak, and it's not conducive to learning, where we get older, we get afraid of being confused. We take it as fear. I don't know the answer. Oh no, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do. Let it occur naturally. It'll go into your mind at an unconscious level. As when you need the information, the more you put in, the more you get out. It's the key to all of this, is to be able to learn at your own time and your own pace. The more you put in, the more you'll get out of it, which is quite useful. And that's a useful exercise to start off with. And if you sort of backtrack on the seminar, you can go through all the 8 steps that we covered. It's entirely up to you, and get your head around that. But the 3-step process you can use is just write down feelings that you're experiencing, the force associated to those feelings. It could be physical sensations too, like butterflies, shoulders tense as well. And then just label them if you want to. It's entirely up to you. It's a technique you can practice along the way, and to sort of develop your own skills. The thought process is instrumental, in my opinion, for the quality of life. When I was doing another show on radio a few years ago, on BBC as well, it was BBC Manchester, I think, a woman who, in her 60s, her goal was to lose some weight. Now, from what I understand, it's been a long time ago since I did the show. I think her husband either passed or they've got divorced. I'm not quite sure 100% now. It was a long time ago. As a result of that, she retired as well. She was on her own. She was withdrawn, and the negative emotions she was experiencing was leading her to eating the wrong foods at the wrong times, and she was putting on weight. And in her 60s, she's got still loads of life ahead of her. You have to resign yourself. What people do in their life is entirely up to them, but she's got life ahead of her. Amazing woman. And we got down and we did various techniques and worked with her along the way. And ironically, she did lose the weight. I say ironically because from what I understand, it's a long time since I did the show. I stand corrected, by the way. I'm pretty sure it's in the first show that the doctor said she had a medical condition, thyroid condition. It might make it very difficult to lose weight. I don't know. You have to listen to the transcript yourself. It's out there somewhere. She said, well, are you willing to still work with me on that basis? I said, well, it's entirely up to you. Maybe you should consult your doctor. I'm not a medic, see what he thinks. But in my opinion, or she thinks, whoever it was, in my opinion, you're responsible for your own actions. If it's not going to cause you any harm, then let's have a shot. But I say ironically, she lost the weight. On top of losing the weight, she also managed to go swimming for the first time in 56 years. She had swimming phobia. We did phobia release technique and some regression. And she got back in the pool. And going back in the pool is not a big thing for most people. For her, it meant that she could socialise again and go swimming every Tuesday morning. She went away for the first time on holiday to Spain after many, many years and enjoyed herself. She was out and about, and she said she'd run for the first time in 30 years. She had frenetic knees. She changed her life. She changed her life from withdrawing herself and secluding herself. You got life left in you yet. And I use a story. And the reason why I use a story, the transcript is out there somewhere, because it shows the rest of your life can be the best of your life. We don't need to resign ourselves to the situation we're in. And whatever you're going through in life, whatever adversity you're facing, tomorrow's a new day, fresh start. Who knows what can happen to anybody in any situation. And I think that it pays to have a level of optimism, but realism too. But know that life is a marathon. Things happen in life, and so response to what happens, that's key. And we've got to keep going forward. In my coaching philosophy is about 90% solution and 10% problem, is what I say. Focus on solution, not to get too bogged down by problem in going forward. So I'm sure you enjoyed tonight's seminar. Do not really enjoy delivering it? Do feel free to email me on info@xsolvenlp.com. Do email me if you wish. You can email me direct any questions you've got on tonight's seminar. I've really enjoyed delivering it. Do watch it as often as you can, and also watch the first one. I will in future do another seminar which will go into more detail about challenging distortion. So I will do a third part to this series which will be more focused on purely challenging distortions. So look out for that. I'll announce on social media and send messages out there for that. Until next time, live with passion, love and light.